So folks are logging in, so let's go ahead and get started.
Okay.
Yeah, hi everybody. Thank you all so much for joining us today. My name is Clementine Thomas, and I own Bold Fork Books. We're a culinary bookshop located in the Mount Pleasant neighborhood in Washington, D.C. We're DC's only dedicated cookbook store, and we carry a diverse array of cookbooks, food writing, food magazines, some used cookbooks, some kitchen tools, a little bit of everything. The shop is currently open for socially distanced in-store browsing, or you can find us online at boldforkbooks.com. I could not be more excited to introduce Roxana Jullapat, who's joining us all the way from LA to talk about her truly extraordinary new book, Mother Grains, Recipes for the Grain Revolution. Roxana is the co-owner and head baker of LA's beloved Friends and Family, a seasonal grain-centric cafe and bakery in East Hollywood. She cut her teeth in some of LA's most prestigious kitchens, including Luke, AOC, Campanelli, Cook County, and she's a incredible culinary advocate in the whole grain movement. In addition to talking to us about her extraordinary book, Roxana is also going to show us how to bake her iconic chocolate chip cookies. So we are all truly in for a treat today. Roxana is in conversation with Jonathan Bethony. Jonathan is the co-owner and head baker at DC's Seylou. Seylou is a whole grain bakery and mill, and they source grains, organic whole grains exclusively from the Mid-Atlantic region. Seylou opened in 2017, and in just a few short years, Jonathan and his team have truly changed the way that Washingtonians think about sourcing and baking with whole grains. So just a few quick couple of housekeeping notes before we get started. We'll begin with the conversation between Jonathan and Roxana, and then we'll get into the baking demo, and we'll close with the Q&A. So there'll be plenty of time for your questions. If you do have questions, which are strongly encouraged, we just ask that you type them into the Q&A tab at the bottom of your screen as opposed to in the chat. Lastly, this event is free, but you can support it and support Bold Fork Books by purchasing your copy of Mother Grains from us. Copies are available both in the shop and online, and I promise when I say you're not going to want to miss out on this extraordinary book. So thank you all again for taking some time out of your Sunday to join us. It feels really wonderful to be in community with you all, even if it is virtually. And with that, I'm going to hand things over to Roxana and Jonathan. Hi, guys.
Hi. Thank you so much for having us.
Yes, a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you, Clementine. Yeah. This is a neat experience. So, yeah, how would you like us to go about this?
You know, Jonathan, what I thought would be cool, I was so honored, really, and really happy to hear that you could be one of my potential interlocutors, because last time I saw you, you were still at the Bread Lab in Washington. Do you remember that crazy day?
Yeah, I'm trying to remember what was going on that day.
It was I think it was like just a random day that I got an email from Glenn Roberts at Grain, a Grain godfather from Anson Mills, and he said, okay, buy a ticket to Washington, meet us this day, and we're gonna do a polycrop loaf.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking, Jonathan has the best job ever.
Yeah.
And like when I heard you open a bakery, I'm like, I cannot think of a better transition to like put to good use all of that knowledge of having worked there and see all these varietals of grain and wheat. So yeah, like it must be so fun.
Yeah, I mean, it's the whole journey's been, both fun and totally crazy at the same time.
Totally crazy.
It's kind of like the day you saw. But that's part of it, and we're going through it now, as we were just talking about with, how we reacted to the pandemic. But it's cool to see that how much has progressed, and seeing you now with your own bakery and having this awesome book. now I have my own bakery.
Mhm.
No awesome book, but that's okay. I can have awesome books of friends in my bakery. So, and just seeing really the public interest, how much that's
Right.
increased from when we saw each other years ago.
Totally.
It was just kind of, I want to say it was, I don't even know if it was really getting started. I feel like now it's kind of like really getting
Right.
started.
I agree.
Then we were lucky if people knew, that wheat wasn't white flour. It was
Right.
but we've come so much further, and that's part of why I was really excited about this book, is because Roxana decided to focus on like a lot of grains that I really like to use at Seylou,
Mhm.
sorghum and buckwheat, and then ones that I can learn more about, like rice and barley. So really cool. Yeah, congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you. So for sure, that visit to the bread lab was very informative,
Hmm.
because I mean, I feel like we still have that lapse, and maybe you can tell me if you agree or disagree, or how do you feel like we're gonna fill that gap between like the intelligentsia of like the science people, right, and like those of us who need a little bit of science in what for to do the job that we do, but not quite that much, right?
Right. Yeah.
Um, right, but yet we kind of like totally need their work, and like we can reap the benefits of everything that they're doing and discovering. So I wonder how we're gonna find more opportunities to have a great exchange of ideas, because the bread lab is awesome, but it's one, and so far removed, right? How do you see us, other than writing cookbooks that take 3 years to put together? How do you see us getting access to this sort of like incredible research all over the country, and not only just in wheat, but like I think of like corn in the University of Iowa, or even sorghum in the South. I was it was hard for me to find more information than what I found when I was writing that chapter.
Mm-hmm. That's a good question. I mean, because I feel like baking is something that's so intuitive, as well as scientific, that
Mhm.
it's easy to go without it, in a sense, and make things work.
Right.
Um, Not to say that we can't benefit from it. So, you know, like you were saying, it's like a lot of folks don't, it can be like too much it can be overwhelming to, figure out the difference between varietals, and, how to use all, as bakers. I know, like, if I try to
Right.
sell flour to somebody, or try to, Nan, I'm sure has she
Yeah.
really paved the way with this, and the difficulty it is to, she's got this knowledge, this complicated knowledge of how each of her varieties work from year to year, gets them
Right.
tested at the California Wheat Commission. She's pretty much an expert at it, and here's a baker that wants to use her product, and all of a sudden it's like, wait, it's not wheat, rye,
I
and
know.
like what's this, like, Sonora Star, what? I mean, and at first it might seem kind of fun, like, hey, look at all this variety out there, look at all this
Right.
diversity, but then you start blowing a few mixes, and it's not working out right, and then it's like, wait, I kind of missed it when it was, easy, and now I'm losing money because all these loaves came out flat or whatever. And so yeah, the science part, like you said, I think a good bridge is the enthusiasm that's
Right.
generated for the adventure. I know at Seylou we try to be as consistent as possible, but we
Mhm.
also are inconsistent as well, almost on purpose, just to reinforce that idea that
Right.
we're working with like very like live and at times volatile substances that are not traditionally thought of that way. And
Right.
so, helping to educate on freshness, locality, diversity, Um, it's I think the best thing is what you're doing, making it taste good.
Right.
Using your culinary skills to make things that are different and that teach these ideas, but that still stand on the same level, or I think better than what's conventional out there. And I think that really starts to blow people's minds, because it's like,
Well, I'm sure you went through this process when you were developing your recipes for Seylou, just like we did here, was that we started to sort of like um, transform a repertoire that existed, which was mostly recipes from my background. And what was really interesting was how that it wasn't really incredibly hard. It was very, very doable. One. Second, like the flavor was transformative. Like flavor and texture were not. I thought it was. We would have to say to some people, yeah, it's a little challenging, but it's interesting and it's really good for you and good for the environment, good for the community. And I never had to go there. Not once have I had to like preach to anyone, because I feel like these flowers really produce food that stands on its own.
Yeah.
Do you find that?
Yeah, I purposely didn't want to. People are like, you should tell people what you're doing for the farmers, and you should do, why, other than the price tag,
Right.
kind of an
Right.
indicator of what's going on here. You should tell people what you're doing. You should tell people it's organic. You should tell people,
right.
But I just wanted to see if it worked. I want to see
Right.
if it would work without anybody knowing any of that stuff. If they would still like it, and it's like what you're saying. It's kind of proof that that's where the hope is on this, is that the grains will do the work for us.
And that's fantastic, because if you think about it, we're in California, in LA, where people are like definitely health conscious. Like it's a thing, it's a thing that borders on the annoying, often. But I would say that like now we like things like whole grains and grains with names such as Red 5 or Spelt or Sonora Wheat are recognizable, right? And it's the case in DC. So we can. I feel like we can definitely say that like the United States has come a long way in the acquisition of this vernacular of grain,
right?
Which is great. It actually makes us so much better bakers and more knowledgeable of agriculture and the growing seasons of grain. And
yeah, another thing that just came to mind, Roxana, is that I'm seeing, and I'm sure you've seen too, is it's the bakers that come and work for us and come through the program. And I remember having this big breakthrough. The first 2 years, I just kind of bowled through and did everything myself.
right.
I have a great pastry chef too, Charbel. We worked together for a couple of years before opening Seylou, just coming up with this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And he really, really, really helped me get it off the ground, and is still, a huge part of Seylou. And I remember it was just him and I that really got the whole thing going. And I remember thinking I had to get over this hurdle of like, I really thought I'm the only one that understands this. I'm the only one that's going to be able to do this. I can't.
Right.
To the point where I couldn't even hire employees, and I was
right.
getting smoked, and just totally
Right.
and screwing up a lot because I was so fried.
Right.
Totally.
You're so tired.
Yeah, not able to really talk to our guests, not really able to, manage well. And I remember having this breakthrough when I broke down and started hiring. That someone else can do this. Someone else can learn this. And then it went to, hey, this other person's younger than me.
Oh yeah.
Probably more talented than me, smarter than me, faster than me. And I was just like, wait a minute. It's actually better if I kind of like step out of the way and let this next generation come in and have to create an environment for them to learn in, and for them to, interact and build a community within, and to watch them go out and see what they do.
Right.
And that's what I'm really excited about. It's going to take a little time, but they're going to go open, their own projects or work for other folks, and it's going to spread that way too.
I really hope so. I really hope so. I feel like definitely we have applicants that want to work here because we work with these flowers. And also I've had like one person, which I found it a really interesting exercise. I had one person quit because we work with these flowers. And I remember having that conversation of like, okay, tell me what is so frustrating about it.
Yeah.
And she was like, I worked for 5 years in like bakeries all over Los Angeles, and it's like when you open that bag, it works. When you open that generic, King Arthur flower, and I'm like, yeah, you're right. That
She's
totally is a thing.
Yep.
Yeah, it's a huge industry. There's tons of interest behind making that flower work exactly the same all the time.
And
You
cheap,
know?
too. I'm amazed at how cheap it is for all that.
Yes.
work
Oh my
that
God.
goes
Oh my God. 100%. And
all the research,
people,
all the refinement, all the blend,
yes,
the testing, all the transport. It's just like, and yet it's way cheaper than
it's way cheaper.
what you can get.
Yeah. They also have like great PR and incredible marketing tools and all kinds of things, but that's one in like a history of like at least maybe 24 to 30 bakers that have worked here over 4 years. And we have people that have are complete converts, and that come with recipes on their own accord.
Yeah.
And like these are not kids that are like at this point, like they are pretty exposed to flour from all of non-colors flowers, and then flowers we get from all over the country. And like still we see something exciting, like I bring something new and they're still excited, and they want to get their hands on it. Oh, and what are you going to do with that? And they open the bag and they smell it, and like then they have like their thoughts of like, oh, it smells like sawdust, or no, it smells like mushrooms. And I'm like, what is this, wine tasting? So I think that is definitely not that I said a school on purpose, but I feel like definitely people have been like the bug is contagious, and I think that I hope that when they walk out of here they continue to do impressive grain work.
Yeah, I really think so. Roxana, I wanted to ask you what your transition was to why you decided to like focus on some of these other grains.
So let's see. Well, I don't know why I always thought of wheat as a secondary grain, or one in a pool of a few. And I think it's because I am Costa Rican, so I come from a culture where corn is the main grain, right? So maybe I grew up thinking there's two grains, there's two flowers, there's these two enormous families, and then maybe that makes you a little bit more open-minded and open-heart towards the possibility of having these other grains that can have status that is equal to wheat and or corn. And then here in LA, you're so exposed to so many cultures, and like I live here in my neighborhood, the supermarket, really, like the grocery store that I go to, has a humongous aisle of rye bread because there's a quite dense little population of Armenian or Russian Armenian people. So it's kind of like it kind of like became obvious to me that the story wasn't just this few things that we see in cookbooks and we're taught to work with in cooking schools, Then a few of the people that I work for, like most notably Nancy Silverton, uses a lot of durum or semolina, even in her baking, with kind of like a Italian slant, so a lot of like orange zest and fennel pollen or fennel seed and that kind of thing. Obviously, like buckwheat and crepes, always a thing we always did. So it felt like you just have to look further. Like the information was here, the concept that there are all these grains that we can rely on and explore further are there. You just had to do the work, a little bit more work. And I'm a big fan of colors. So I remember thinking, I'm like, wow, all flowers should be spelled. Like, why, it's like to cut into a cake and have that like rusty brown hue. It's like, that's what every cake should be.
Yeah.
Right. So I don't know. It just kind of like, I feel like maybe subconsciously I was associating all this like sort of brandy looking things into a possibility. It looked like potential rather than, it totally looked like, oh, there's more, but wait, there's more. And let's not forget that here in California, like we have like these crazy farmers markets, which are very comparable to any farmers market on the East Coast. The only thing is that we have longer seasons, right? And the varieties, it's like crazy, and like you really feel like you're on an acid trip if you go to like Santa Monica Farmers Market in August. Like, it's just insane, like peaches the size of my head, like insane, right?
Wow.
So you really become kind of like really attuned to like seasonal things and planty things. And I don't know, it doesn't it feel like, I mean, once you make that connection that all this grain is agriculture, like you can't ignore it.
Yeah.
Like you're gonna want to use it. You're gonna want to tap into it. Like it carries a lot of meaning about what is growing right now, what other foods pair well with those grains, and why, who's growing it, how does it, what kind of income or how important it is to their operation, So like before you know, it's like you're knee deep, knee deep in it.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can relate to that. That, I mean, you can't, once you've seen it, you can't unsee. And
Right.
I remember my experience first. I mean, I'd heard and kind of been taught that way from, my time a little bit at the Bread Lab, Glenn, and then working with some chefs, doing consulting afterwards. And but it wasn't until I really started walking the fields of these farms that practice regenerative agriculture.
Right.
I could see diversity in action. I can see that, like, why is buckwheat important? It's not just for, soil and breaking up disease cycles or biomass. It's also like for pollinators. It's the bees.
Right.
It's like
Right.
there's this whole ecosystem out there
Totally.
that I feel, if, personally, and I'm sure you feel this way too, but I feel like we need to promote like a healthy way of not just eating, but of the way we treat
Right.
our planet. And those two are connected. They're like the same.
100%.
We are the soil. I mean, we're like,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
it works for that, works for us too,
Totally.
if we grow diversity and grow, we don't pollute our soils, and grow in a good way, that yields food that is better for our bodies, and if we as
100%.
bakers and chefs are able to, like, translate that message, and make that available to our communities, then.
And then, like if we think about also how, while I was doing research on all these grains, I came to realize that a lot of these grains are and their role around the world, and they are just incredible powerhouses in terms of like feeding the food insecure countries, entire nations. Sometimes like grains like sorghum are the main source of protein in really, really disadvantaged communities and far-flung places where we don't have a lot of possibilities to like ship, packaged manufactured goods. However, they're in a position to cultivate and grown and produce incredible food of great nutritional value. That is good for our environment. Like we would do well to learn from those people. Like we think of them as poor, and actually who are the people eating out of bags and microwavable meals? That's us. Like think about like how we're totally missing out on incredibly nutrient rich food.
Yeah, and I feel like the beast that we're battling too, I mean, is just, and some of my travels I've seen just as dangerous, if not more dangerous. I do some work in West Africa, and like say take Senegal for instance. It's a former French colony, and wheat does not grow in Senegal.
Nope.
It's just too lowland and muggy, and
and hot.
Yeah, but what does grow well is corn and millet and sorghum and fonio and beans and things like this, and hibiscus and moringa and like all this, baobab and lots of fruits and a lot of healthy foods. Yet I'd say most of the calories, I mean, not most of the calories that I saw, but a good portion of them come from white flour baguettes that are culturally completely embedded there. And all of that flour is imported from Europe.
I know.
It's just like, and yet there's, there's issues such as anemia, and it's like white flour has got zero iron. I mean, you could buy it, but
I guess, yeah.
But you take millet, it's got 3 times the iron, and so in sorghum too. It's fonio has lots of minerals too. I mean, these foods that are there already provide such a wealth of nutrition, and it's weird almost going back, and I did some work showing some of the teaching some of the bakers how to put it into the bread, which seemed weird because it's like these indigenous foods, pollinization, bread, and now trying to put the indigenous foods into the bread.
I know.
Now bread is the dominant culture, and it's just like it's a trip. But I feel like this work here this is a guide. Maybe that's how it is now in these times.
Right.
The world has become small, and it is about mixing these traditions, mixing these cultures, and making.
And then, for sure. And definitely using these grains that have cultural attachment to certain regions of the world, they definitely have the power of evoking these regions, even if we haven't been there, and these culinary traditions. And I find that incredibly unifying and a really great way to build empathy for the rest of humanity. But also one thing that I find about it is that it kind of makes you want to explore even more. Hopefully you don't feel enough breaks and frustrations and the inconsistencies of whole wheat flour, that next time you travel, you're gonna like look at flour on shelves and be like, oh, I should take it back home and learn a little bit more about the flour of England or wherever you happen to be at the time, and it really makes you pay attention in ways you never thought you had to before. And we talk a lot about mindfulness and being present and in the moment these days, and how important that is to like distress and just find a little bit more enjoyment out of our daily chores. And I find that whole grain has done that for me, like, because it does look so different, smells different, feels different. For us bakers with a lot of miles in our careers, like you become a little jaded, but to be able to see a muffin and know that it is completely different from all the muffins you've made before, that's really rich. Like that's a really great experience, and it is transformative. It really makes you a better baker, and it makes you want to do more.
Yeah, and I like how you drew the personal element in, and that's what keeps me going. Is I feel like my work is teaching me how to be more mindful. I mean, if I don't freak out. Which
will happen.
As long as I don't burn a whole load of bread or just like make some catastrophic mistake. But even in those times, those are maybe the best times to learn, and that's what I love about it. And I really teach my staff, that you just gotta be, your heart's gotta be wide open in this, and you're gonna get, it's like, you're gonna get hit. Like you have to you can't be afraid of that. And that's how you're gonna learn how to move out of the way the next time, or that's how you're gonna, the failure is an opportunity. No.
Right. And then it also makes you understand processes and like, you know, from a more scientific level or more like just, you know, baking science kind of level. Maybe you're needing to completely understand what were the chemical reactions that led you to that place or that result. But I find people developing a sense of like, oh, this needs a little bit more mush, or maybe I need to reduce a tiny little bit the amount of flour because you have all this extra bran in there. And what else could we want out of baking if not the ability to anticipate issues and come up with solutions just because it has become our second nature, you know? And like you know that a little extra butter is gonna be very good with whole grain.
Oh yeah, whole grain and fat. It's just like
Yeah. How is your croissant adventure? I know that your croissant is 100% whole grain.
yeah, it's good. I mean, it's really hard to make super consistent because I think a lot of it has to do with the milling, and
Right.
we mill everything in house, and the farmers that we work with have, you know, supply is constantly changing, and conditions like they don't have like the Amish farm that I get the hard red spring is like really hard to kind of come by where I
Is
am.
that right?
Yeah, just because it's, you know, we have a lot of winter wheat, which is softer.
Right.
So
Right.
for croissant, I feel like I need like something strong. It has to
Right.
I have to be able to withstand all that butter and all that bran, and
Right.
all that stretching and all that proof,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
so it's kind of
Yeah.
gotta be tough.
Yeah. I've had a lot. Yeah. You get a lot of rips for sure.
So yeah, tearing on croissants, it's like I just
Yeah.
can't figure out how to stop the tearing. Usually the interior is still pretty good, so but
Yeah.
I have a lot of tears, and I have not been able to really crack that one.
Yeah. We
But
actually, what solved it for us was spelt.
yeah,
Yeah, it had a little bit of softness and flexibility. Who would have thought, right?
wow, okay, and so
Yeah.
and did that just give it some extensibility or what?
Yeah.
How do you think?
Yeah, it made the dough a teeny bit softer, but you know, we do use a little bit of high gluten refined flour in ours.
Right.
But we had all the tears in the world, right? And I feel like we use Sonora Wheat,
Yeah.
grown here in California, milled by Nan Kohler at Grist and Toll. And I feel like that Sonora is strong, you know? It's not, it's probably not, it's definitely not a high gluten flour, but it's pretty strong. And we used to have crazy ripping. Like we almost purposely had to underproof. We purposely had to underproof the croissant just because otherwise it would just
start going. They start
right.
apart. Yeah.
Right, and then we did. We added. I think the formula right now has 10% of spelt.
Okay. I'll give
and
it. I never.
Yeah,
thought,
I don't know. Yeah.
the reason why I didn't think of spelt is because when I mill spelt, I get these huge bran flakes. It looks like corn flakes.
Right.
You know? Like
right.
And those, you know, maybe what I can do is I can soak them overnight.
Yeah.
In like whey or like soak in something to break them down, even just water, but try to break them down a little bit so they're really soft going in.
Yeah.
That's why I didn't think spelt, because for whole grain, the bran particle size makes a big difference.
Right. Yeah. I guess you know, you were mentioning how milling is important. I mean, like, I mean, you're definitely like the real deal. Like I'm using a good miller and a fantastic, amazing miller. And not that your milling is not awesome. Great, but that woman, I swear to God, I just go and pick it up, or she comes and drops it off. It's such a luxury, like an incredible blessing.
And if we had that in DC, I'd be doing the same thing.
Yeah.
There was like nobody doing anything like that. So I was like, all right, I guess I
gotta mill it.
put one in the bakery and, you know, try to figure this out. So. But yeah.
Is this a good segue to get into the demo? Should we do demo now? Is this a good time?
Yes.
Yeah. All right. So speaking of all things awesome grains, I buy an awesome, beautiful rye flour from Nan Kohler. Nan Kohler is the owner and operator and miller of Gristom Toll here in California. She's based in a small town east of here called Pasadena. She does ship nationwide, and her rye is really, really beautiful with a really, really nice particle size. However, for whole grain chocolate chip cookies, I find that a coarse grind or a home-milled flour actually works really well. So in the book, one thing that I wanted to do was make chocolate chip cookies with as many flours as I could. So I include 7 different versions. And this one is my favorite. It's the one that we serve here at Friends and Family. And it's a really, really easy recipe to make. So this is what they're going to look like when they're done. They're dark, not because I bake them dark, but because that's the natural color of rye. So we're going to start. I mean, we'll be done seriously in less than 10 minutes. That's how easy and fast this recipe is. I want to bring the tripod here so you guys can see inside the mixer bowl. Is that right? Okay. So ingredients. We have 4 ounces of unsalted butter, and that is going to go right here. Mine is a little bit soft because it's tempered, but you can use butter straight from the fridge. You just have to whip it a little bit further. Like you might find it that it will take a little bit longer to cream with the sugars in the mixer. And this is half a cup of dark brown sugar and then half a cup of regular granulated sugar. And I am just going to mix this or with a paddle attachment, like we say, cream it until it forms a uniform paste. And you can be at medium speed. Then about halfway, you can actually stop the mixer and use a rubber spatula just to scrape the bottom and the sides of the bowl to make sure that nothing's getting stuck in there. And mix further. So while this is about to finish mixing, I'm gonna crack 1 egg. And I'm gonna go ahead and actually, let me show you what this should be like. So now I can't tell that there's any butter there, like everything is kind of like part of the mix. So that's when you know you're fully creamed. You also don't want to over cream because that could make really soft and out of control cookies that spread too much in the sheet pan. So we don't want that. I'm gonna add my egg and vanilla extract. And continue mixing until it's fully incorporated. And then once again, I'm gonna go ahead and sometimes I like to add the leavening at this point. The leavening would be the baking soda and the salt. And sometimes I just mix it inside the flour. That either way it works. Sometimes when I do the baking soda before the flour is because I feel like I'm making a really big batch, and I want all that leavening to be evenly distributed. So I feel like that's an efficient way to do that. But this is small amounts, so we can add it with a flour. That's what I'm gonna do here. So I'm gonna mix on slow speed so that I don't have a rye cloud all over here. And at this point, we just want it to come together, to be one solid lump of dough. And yet again, we can do one of these scrapey moments. What I like about this size of the recipe is that it makes about 12 cookies. So you're not committing to making a ton yet, because the dough freezes and refrigerates really well. You can hold some of them if you don't have that much of an appetite for cookies, or if you live by yourself or just one person like me and my husband. So we like to make some cookies, but not 12 at a time. So I would put half of the dough in the freezer, or even ball it, all of it, bake 6, hold 6 for another day. The last thing I'm gonna do is have the chocolate. This is about 1 cup of chocolate chips. I recommend really dark chocolate for rye flour, because rye and chocolate have a really great affinity. I would say if you can find chips, you can definitely buy a really good high quality dark chocolate bar and chop it with a serrated knife. So I'm gonna make it just come together. And that's it. This cookie definitely has a good ratio of chocolate chips to dough, and that's, by design. I really like a lot of chocolate. And then all we have left to do is refrigerate the dough. You can use a little piece of plastic film or parchment paper, or for a more eco-friendly solution, you could also put it in a Tupperware and make sure that it's covered with a lid. And then I'm just gonna transfer all of this here and make myself a dough packet. So this dough is actually pretty soft at this point for us to bake right away. All cookies benefit from a little resting in the refrigerator, or cookies in this style, meaning with cream butter. See, a little too soft. However, I had made some cookie dough earlier today, and this has been refrigerated for more than a few hours. And then we're gonna divide it in about 12 to 14 pieces, about 2 ounces each, or a good sort of lumpy, something sort of like this. You could use a ice cream scooper if you like, to make them nice and uniform. What I like of doing it this way, and it's because it's cold, it's really easy to work with, and it doesn't stick to your hands. And if you have a good eye, you can just do it by eye and hope that the portions are somewhat similar, because they look the same in size. But if not, you could also put them on a scale if you wanted to be really precise. These cookies, weight-wise, they're about 2 ounces. And they do bake well as a larger cookie, and they also bake well as a smaller cookie, so you can choose. And then I'm gonna go ahead and wrap the rest of the dough and keep it for later. And then another cool touch that I like for finishing the cookies is to put a little bit of chunky salt. In this case, I'm using Maldon salt, which is thick and nice and flaky, but you could use your favorite coarse sea salt. And then I showed you guys earlier. So this guy's in my oven here at the bakery, which is a convection oven. They take about 10 to 12 minutes. At home, I feel like they're gonna take more like 20. And actually, yeah, that's what they take in my KitchenAid oven at home. And then when you wanna pull them out, when they're actually still soft in the middle, you would almost see a softy spot right here. And if I were to press it, it actually feels softer than this part of the cookie. And when we open it up, it should have sort of that feel. Still soft in here, crunchy in there. And that's it. Could not be easier. Any questions? And this cookie can be used, can be made with up to other 7 flours, and many others, I'm sure. And this is definitely one of the winners. I also like a version made with buckwheat. It's also really nice, similar to rye, like a darker grain that tastes really good with chocolate.
How did you decide which chapter to include it in the book? Because it's in the sorghum chapter.
It's in the sorghum chapter, yeah. Sorghum is cool because it makes them kind of chewy.
Mm. Well, it looks like we have, Greg wants to know the name of the, it's the chocolate chip cookie recipe.
Yeah,
Greg.
Chocolate chip cookie. It's kind of pretty central to the I mean, a lot of the recipes in the book are far more challenging. Because my mom keeps asking me, why do you keep making chocolate chip cookies? But because it seems like something that I do so much already. But what I really like about this recipe is that because I know it so well, it really helped me sort of identify all the things that the flour would do to a recipe. So this is the sort of like the photo showing all the versions. So I made this with barley, sorghum, rice, buckwheat, spelt, Sonora, oats, and rye. So it's pretty, and there's actually, the recipe contains variations to all of those versions. So it's a good way to get to explore grains. And it's also a word of advice I give to anybody sort of starting out with whole grains. Is like, take a recipe you love, that you know well, that you do all the time, and just change the flour. You can change the flour 100%, or you can just change a portion of the flour. And you will learn a lot just from that first experience. Even if the recipe is for pancakes that you have on a weekend at your house.
It looks like we have a question in the Q&A. What chocolate do you recommend when using sorghum?
Let's see. So you know, sorghum, I think of sorghum kind of like almost like a Sonora Wheat, like a neutral, sweet, nice, friendly flour. So I think a semi-sweet chocolate would go really well. One chocolate that we're able to purchase here in Los Angeles at grocery stores is called Guittard. It's French, and it comes in the little, the chips are, and it is like, I think you buy the bag. It's a little bit pricier than everything else, but it's really, really good. I also have, I think like I might have seen it at a few Whole Foods. And it's they do have like super dark and also semi-sweet. But another chocolate that we find here at Trader Joe's is Valderona in like thin bars, and you can just chop those up yourself. And you know, us pastry chefs and bakers have access to all kinds of chocolate. I'm actually in the room where we started the chocolate, I'm looking at it. So yeah, I mean, I definitely think that the quality of the chocolate is important here. I mean, if you like Nestle Toll House chips, by all means, like, go for it. They will give you a very quintessential cookie.
So I think, guys, we are fully in the Q&A section, so please feel free to type your questions. I have a question. I was listening to another talk that you were given, and you were kind of framing the different waves of whole grains in terms of their popularity. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about that. I just found that so fascinating to think of it as, you know, starting out in the 70s and then how it's kind of evolved to how we consider and
how we look at whole grains. Yeah, it's interesting. I had this conversation with a journalist the other day, and she's old enough to remember the 70s. when there was this sort of like this an acknowledgement of whole grains as being an important part of eating well. And that there were this sort of proclivity towards whole grains was actually part of like a more interest in microbiotic diets and things of that sort. And the baked goods made with those whole grains were really, really coarse. They were more focused on health. They also contain other ingredients popular at the time, such as blackstrap molasses or honey instead of sugar or refined sugar and things like that, which were probably highly nutritious, but the focus wasn't necessarily on artsy or deliciousness necessarily. It was a health angle. And I feel like that was probably like the time when like the bran muffin was born, which I love. I kill for a bran muffin. I like old school bran muffin with the raisins and everything. But then when my friend Kim Boyce was writing her cookbook, Good to the Grain, about 11 years ago, there was definitely a different part of the movement. The movement had changed, and you could see that people were more interested in alternative grains such as quinoa and amaranth and millet and things that were more like gluten-free and that you could find at bougie grocery stores such as Whole Foods or Sprouts or Lasens or, you know, these fancy stores that are all over LA actually. But and there was, because there was an interest yet still in wellness, but also more of like a reaction against gluten, right? And that stuck for a long time, a lot longer than I thought it was healthy for us, because you saw a lot of like grain-free mixes that were actually full of other things like gums and stabilizers, and I'm not sure that that's great for your body either. And then about 5 years ago, I feel like we bakers in the U.S. in different areas, different hubs around the country, we kind of like were 100% able to buy this local flour in a reasonable way, meaning that you didn't have to go to the farm 3 hours away from where you live, or that it was milled properly, so you didn't have to sift the hell out of it to take out the stalks and the seeds and the stones and all the funky things that made it into the flour. So I feel like this is our third wave. This is our third wave of whole grain baking. This is definitely kind of like a time when we can call it universal, and we can talk about it without sounding elitist or presumptuous, because we can share the knowledge and like reasonably expect others to be able to make our recipes and learn the names, learn to say rye and sorghum and spell it with the H right there in the middle. And it's no longer something weird, or it's not a trend, nor is it a fad or a marketing trick to see if you're to draw more business in. It really is kind of like a way of baking. It's just who we are now.
One of the amazing things I really appreciate and love about this book, because for me, a lot of these ingredients are very new, is how you, at the beginning of each chapter, sort of set up a little bit of the history about the grain, its origins, where it is found, where it is grown, when it is grown. How did you decide how much of that to include in the book? Because it doesn't feel overwhelming at all, which I really appreciate.
Right.
But was that a tricky balance for you?
Yes, it sure was, because same thing. Like I'm like, ultimately, this is not a thesis, like this is not my dissertation. Like this is just a cookbook, and ultimately, I want people to bake. Like that is the mission of the book, right? I want you to use these ingredients and cook and bake. However, I think that these grains are kind of like hilarious, and like they have incredible stories and amazing personalities, and and when you think about, for example, underappreciated grains like rye or buckwheat, right? That they have had a long story with us here in the northern hemisphere, and they used to be sort of grains of subsistence, and now they're fancy grains. Like you can buy rye for a lot of money if you wanted to, and make really, 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 really sophisticated breads with it. So I think it's important for us to know that it's not just like some like gray matter in a bag, and that it has fed civilizations and determined the geography, the politics, and the cultures of many, many countries around the world. But yes, in terms of how much, I would say that I would do a little bit of a draft. I remember thinking, okay, barley. What do we know about barley? Okay, so the angle of barley is that gladiators ate barley. And what does that really mean? What does that really mean? That there was an enslaved class that needed to be strong, and like that's what they ate. And I feel like that's really important to us, in terms of like perspective, centuries later, and to know that like gladiators were alive a long, long time ago. So barley was cultivated by the Romans a long, long time ago.
That's incredible. So we are nearing the end of our time. So if no one else has any questions, I have one more, and this is for both Roxana and for you, Jonathan. Do you, maybe it's like picking between your children, but do you have favorite grains that you love the most to work with?
I definitely have. I love them all, and like as I bake with a grain, I find new ways in which I love them, or confirm the ways in which I love them. But I would say that I have a really soft spot for buckwheat. It kind of reminds me. I learned about buckwheat. Yeah, for sure. I knew about the flour in crepes and in Russian cooking and baking, but I really learned about buckwheat through their honey. Knowing, not buying honey that was darker and stronger and really, really assertive. And I like that ecology of buckwheat, that it is a main source of pollen for bees that are also facing hard times, and that that is mostly grown as a bumper crop, and that we definitely have the power to allow growers to monetize that transition crop. And it's delicious and so distinct. You would never mistake it for anything. Buckwheat is so buckwheat.
All right. Okay. That's a tough one. And the more I think about it, the harder it becomes. But the one that comes back to my heart is gotta be millet. And gotta, especially pearl millet. It's the same kind of millet grown in sub-Saharan Africa. And it's just got this like super earthy, just like really, it almost goes into your nose, flavor, and aroma, and color. It's got this like brownish, almost green color. And I think I fell in love with it when I saw the actual plants growing, because here in the mid-Atlantic, a lot of the sorghum varieties are small. Oh, sorry, millet variety. Well, sorghum is technically a millet, but they're short and kind of multicolored, so they look really beautiful in the field. And then when I was in Senegal, it's the same type of millet, but they were the older heirloom varieties, and they would be like 8 feet tall. And,
oh wow.
Yeah, they'd be super tall, and with heads that were like it's like a millet head, like reminded me of corn with just small grains, but one big head per plant. And just seeing what was cool about millet is seeing how it could really thrive in poor soils. And just with global warming and a lot of these soils, turning sandy. I feel like crops like millet are going to be more and more important in order to feed people, and it's also also a superfood. I mean, it's really healthy stuff. So yeah, bread, I struggle with it a little bit in bread. I still want to do 100% millet something, but we definitely incorporate a lot of millet into our breads, and then we do a millet chocolate chip cookie.
Yum.
That's nice, and I also find that grinding it coarse makes it better. I don't know why, but we had to go through that too. But yeah, that would be it for me.
Amazing. Well, thank you guys, you both so much for taking some time to join us and share about the book and your work with grains at Seylou, at Friends and Family, and in this gorgeous book. So if you haven't yet picked up your copy, Mother Grains is available at Boldford Books on the website, or in the shop, or at wherever your local bookstore is. Thank you again for taking some time out of your Sunday. Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you, Roxana. And enjoy the rest of your afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. This was so fun.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, and Roxana.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you, Jonathan.
Go sign my book. Visit the bakery.
I promise to come visit. I can't wait.
All right. Take care now. Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.